Hello and welcome to another episode of Threat Update. I'm Kilian Englert, and joining me as usual is Ryan O'Boyle. Ryan, how's your week going?
Hey, Kilian. Going well. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thanks for being on again. So I know we had talked a couple days ago, or a little bit earlier this week, about some of the investigations you've been working on, and I was sensing a pattern starting to form during that time. It sounds like Active Directory and service accounts kind of are coming up into play in a lot of these investigations. And what I wanted to ask you about that is, why are service accounts such a big target of attack?
Service accounts are very tricky to manage.
Sure.
Of course, I'm sure everybody listening to this today understands that we all have them. Everybody has service accounts to some extent within their organization. But time and time again, the biggest risks that we often run into, and the biggest factors in a lot of investigations are the service accounts with elevated privileges that tend to get compromised. And unfortunately, this leads attackers and external threat actors to having very highly privileged access to a lot of different systems around the organization. And it's hard to manage them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense too. In terms of kind of detecting this and managing it, what are some of the things that make it difficult detecting when a service account is being abused or misused?
Sure. So, when we think about the true definition of a service account, and a lot of times how we define it within applications is it should be dedicated for a specific process, dedicated for a specific use case, used for a very specific thing throughout each day. However, in real life, it's not always that simple. A lot of times we have interactive logons with service accounts. Multiple people have the credentials. They're used all over the place through many different systems to do many different administrative tasks. Which, when it comes to detection, and a lot of times we talk about behavioral detections, it makes it very challenging. If it's inherently doing many different things every single day, it's very hard to build a very specific baseline around these accounts. And of course, also the deviations don't really look that anomalous. So it makes the threat detection side quite challenging in this regard.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like it. So I guess the kind of maybe the two takeaways from that, at least from what I'm hearing, is just kind of really putting the diligence around making sure that service accounts just are doing the service operations. We disable interactive logons and things like that, and kind of limiting the scope of the usage. Would that be more or less correct?
Definitely. And, I think one of the biggest challenges that I see with organizations is dealing with things like legacy service accounts. A lot of times we might have security teams and admin teams that come in that inherit service accounts, things that have been working for maybe the last 5-10 years. And, obviously we don't want to break things. So it gets quite challenging in order to clean these up.
So, and maybe we're going a little bit off topic here, but potentially seeing where they're like authenticating to or from, would be a good indicator of how it's being used, maybe outside of the traditional, parameters or the designated use. Would that be correct?
Definitely. That's something that we do all the time. Look at authentication activity and get a good idea around, which devices do we see authentication events originating from.
Right. So that's awesome. That's a great tip, and I think a lot of people find that really useful. The other thing that I wanted to ask about too is we're focusing a lot about Active Directory, and I know it comes up a lot in your investigations. What are some of the other AD hygiene challenges that you typically see or other customers face when you're working with them?
We oftentimes see organizations with many users and even service accounts in very highly privileged groups, things like, domain admins, schema admins, areas like that. Some really classic ones that I like are looking for, SPN valued accounts that also have elevated privileges. These are classic targets for something like a Kerberoasting style of attack or some sort of ticket harvesting attack. And then also more nuanced indicators as well. So things like specific UAC flags, like the password not required flag, that can potentially allow an account to bypass your domain password policy. The big issue that I run into here is inherently there isn't a great way to understand risk metrics around Active Directory, at least with a lot of the native tools. So it's quite challenging to find these things out of the box.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. I know, digging around in there, there's a lot. Let's put it at that. And anybody who's watching who knows Active Directory or is getting into it can certainly attest. So for those that are out there and looking to kind of take that next step, what are some things that people can do to start to assess their risk in Active Directory? Are there good tools for it, good reports for that, or anything you'd recommend?
Yeah, step one, turn the lights on. We talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
You need to start to give yourself some visibility. We have a really great directory services risk dashboard to start to give you some quantifiable risk metrics. I think starting to look at, like you mentioned earlier, the authentication activity and understanding how users are interacting with the network is very important as well. And even just starting to look at Active Directory. So often we're logging things, we might just be dumping it in the SIM, but are we actually doing something actionable with those events or those indicators? Then that's where we also run into challenges.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it sounds like a great place to start. So I think we've left the audience with a couple great takeaways and a couple really great tips around Active Directory. So we definitely appreciate those tips, Ryan. Thank you so much for coming on and joining, and of course, thank you everybody for watching. If you enjoyed this content, if you want to see more of this content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. That really helps us. And Ryan and I are working out a schedule, but we're going to be live usually on Thursday mornings at about 10:15 Eastern time. So keep a lookout for that recurring every week. So thank you again for watching. Thank you, Ryan, of course, for being on, and we'll look forward to seeing you all again soon. Take care.